Sundar sat alone in his small office, staring at the dim glow of his laptop screen. The quiet hum of the air conditioner filled the room, but it could not drown out the louder noise in his mind. His email was open, a blank draft waiting for the words he had been carrying for weeks. He had typed them in his head 100 times. Today, he was ready to type them for real: his resignation. He had joined the company with a dream. He had worked late nights, traveled across continents, faced criticism, and still tried to lead with honesty and calm. But lately, every meeting felt heavier. Decisions he believed in were questioned. His ideas faced silent walls, and the warmth he once felt in the team had cooled into formal politeness. He told himself it was just a phase, that even the best leaders went through seasons of doubt. But now, the thought of walking away felt like the only relief. His fingers rested on the keyboard. He took a slow breath. He remembered the first day. He had walked into the building, wearing a suit that felt too big and carrying a folder that held his hopes. He remembered his father's voice from years ago, telling him, "Work is not just about what you do. It is about who you are becoming." But right now, Sundar felt like he was becoming someone tired. The clock ticked. His phone buzzed with a reminder: one last meeting before he left for the day. It was with Bill Campbell, the quiet mentor everyone spoke about but few really knew. Well, Bill had been with the company for years, guiding leaders without needing to be in the spotlight. Sundar thought of canceling. What was the point? But something inside told him to go. The meeting room was small, with a round table and a window that looked out over the city. Bill was already there, leaning back in his chair, his hands folded loosely. He was in his usual sweater, the kind of clothing that made him look more like a friendly neighbor than a business legend. "You look tired," Bill said softly, not as an accusation, but as if he had seen through all the layers Sundar tried to keep up. "It's been a long few months," Sundar replied, sitting down. He thought of telling Bill about the resignation. Maybe Bill could help him word it better. Bill didn't rush. He poured 2 cups of coffee from a small pot on the side table and handed one to Sundar. "You know," Bill began, "there are days when you feel like the walls are closing in. I've had those days. I've even packed my bags a few times, but every time, something stopped me. And it wasn't the job, it wasn't the money. It was a question I asked myself: am I leaving because I'm done, or because I'm tired?" Sundar looked down at his coffee. He knew the answer, though he didn't want to admit it. Bill leaned forward. "Tiredness passes. Regret doesn't. The people who count on you, most of them will never say it out loud. But if you walk away, something in their belief will fade too." There was no lecture in Bill's voice, no pressure. It was a quiet truth. Sundar felt a knot form in his chest. He had been so focused on his own exhaustion that he hadn't thought of the quiet faith others placed in him. "I'm not telling you to stay," Bill added. "I'm telling you to decide for the right reason. Don't make a choice you can't sleep with years from now." The room was still. The city lights blinked in the distance. Sundar felt the weight of the resignation email in his mind, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't want to hit send. He left the meeting without making a final decision. But as he walked to his car, he realized the quiet lesson Bill had given him. Sometimes the biggest change doesn't come from grand speeches or big plans. It comes from someone seeing you as you are and reminding you of who you could still be. That night, Sundar didn't send the resignation. Instead, he closed his laptop, sat in the dark for a while, and let himself imagine what staying could mean if he chose to fight. Not out of stubbornness, but out of hope. And in that moment, the fight began again. The next morning, Sundar woke before sunrise. The city outside his apartment was still wrapped in a faint mist, and the streets were quiet except for the occasional sound of a bus passing by. He sat at the edge of his bed, feeling the heaviness of the day ahead. Staying had not suddenly erased the doubts that had been eating at him. If anything, it made the road ahead seem even steeper. At breakfast, his wife noticed his silence. "Rough day ahead?" she asked gently. "Just a lot to sort out," he replied. He didn't want to burden her with the details. She had always been his calm anchor, but this was a storm he felt he had to walk through on his own. When he reached the office, the building felt colder than usual. People moved quickly in the hallways, heads down, eyes fixed on their phones. In the elevator, no one spoke. Sundar watched the numbers climb and felt like he was heading into a space where warmth had been replaced by calculation. His first meeting was with a group of senior managers. The discussion was tense, filled with interruptions and subtle disagreements. Sundar tried to speak, but his ideas were met with nods that carried no real intention. He felt the same resistance that had pushed him toward quitting in the first place. By mid-morning, the weight on his shoulders was growing. He stepped out of the building and walked to a small park nearby. The air was crisp, and the sound of leaves rustling was a relief after the stale hum of the office. He sat on a bench, remembering Bill's words from the day before. Tiredness passes, regret doesn't. Was he already failing? He wondered. Was staying just delaying the inevitable? His phone buzzed with a message. It was from Bill. Just for words. "Lunch today, my treat." When they met, Bill didn't ask about the meetings or the tension. Instead, he told Sundar a story. "Years ago," Bill began, "I worked with a leader who was brilliant but invisible. He avoided conflict, avoided taking credit, avoided speaking up when it mattered. People respected his knowledge, but they didn't follow him. One day I asked him, 'Why do you hold back?' He said, 'I don't want to make mistakes.' And I told him, 'You can't lead without risking mistakes. The only thing worse than making one is making nothing at all.'" Bill looked at him closely. "You're here because you still have something to build, but you can't build it quietly. Not now." The words landed heavily. Sundar realized he had been holding himself back, speaking only when it felt safe. Maybe it was time to step into the discomfort, even if it meant failing in front of everyone. After lunch, he returned to the office with a different energy. In his afternoon meeting, when an idea he believed in was dismissed, he didn't retreat. He explained it again, with more conviction, and tied it to the bigger vision of the company's future. Some faces stayed blank, but a few really nodded, not the polite kind. It was a small shift, but it felt like the first crack in the wall. That evening, as he packed up his bag, he saw Bill walking past his office. Bill didn't stop, didn't say a word, but he glanced in and gave a small smile, the kind of smile that said, "You're starting to see it." Sundar walked out into the night, knowing the path ahead was still hard. But for the first time in months, he felt a faint spark of something he thought he had lost belief. The following week felt different, though the challenges had not vanished. Sundar began noticing things he had overlooked before, small details that spoke of the mood inside the company. He noticed how the younger engineers avoided sharing new ideas, how meetings often ended without decisions, how small wins went uncelebrated. It was not just him who was tired. The whole place seemed to be running on low flame. On Monday morning, a problem hit. A major project, one that had been in the works for months, was suddenly delayed. A technical fault had slipped through testing, and the client was demanding answers. In the emergency meeting, voices rose, blame was thrown around, and fear filled the room. Sundar listened for a few minutes, then stood up. "Arguing will not fix this," he said. His voice was calm, but it cut through the noise. "We need a plan. Right now." There was silence. It was the kind of moment where everyone waited to see if someone else would speak first. Then Sundar began outlining steps, breaking the problem into parts, assigning clear roles, setting short deadlines. Some people nodded reluctantly, others with relief. As the meeting ended, a junior engineer named Ramesh approached him. "Sir," he said quietly, "thank you for speaking up. No one wanted to take the lead." That small sentence stayed with Sundar for the rest of the day. It was proof that leadership was not about titles or being liked. It was about stepping in when everyone else stepped back. Later that week, Sundar crossed paths with Bill in the cafeteria. They sat together with simple plates of rice and curry. Bill spoke between bites. "You handled that crisis well, but remember, solving a problem is only half the work. The other half is making sure the people solving it believe in what they're doing." Sundar frowned slightly. "You mean motivation?" "No," Bill said. "Trust. Motivation fades, but trust stays. If they trust you, they will follow you even when things go wrong." The words lingered in Sundar's mind. Trust was not something you demanded. It was something you earned, moment by moment. The next day, instead of going straight to his office, he walked through the engineering floor, stopping to talk with small groups. He asked what they were working on, listened to their frustrations, and even sat down beside one team to review their code. It was a small gesture, but it broke the invisible wall between leader and worker. By Friday, the delayed project was back on track. The team delivered it with just a 2-day delay, and the client was surprisingly understanding. In the meeting, Sundar made sure every contributor's name was mentioned, from the senior architect to the intern who had spotted a critical bug. After the meeting, as people left with lighter faces, Sundar noticed something. The same junior engineer, Ramesh, was talking animatedly to a colleague, his eyes bright. It was the look of someone who had been seen. That night, walking to his car, Sundar thought about how a single choice to stay, to speak up, to connect had begun to shift more than just his own path. The crack in the wall was widening, and beyond it, he could see the faint outline of a doorway. 2 weeks later, the doorway Sundar had begun to glimpse was tested in a way he hadn't expected. The company was preparing for a high-stakes board presentation. It was the kind of event where one wrong answer could damage not only reputations, but also the company's future partnerships. Sundar had been working quietly on a proposal for months, an idea to streamline operations and cut wasted costs without cutting jobs. He believed in it deeply. On the day of the internal review, the room was full. Senior executives, department heads, and the CEO sat around a long, polished table. Sundar presented his plan with steady confidence, explaining how the changes would save millions while making the work environment healthier. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the senior executives cleared his throat. "Interesting," he said slowly, "but we think this is too risky. It's better to delay any big changes until next year." Others nodded. One person even said, "It's a nice idea, Sundar, but maybe we stick with safer choices for now." Inside, Sundar felt that old frustration, the one that had nearly driven him to resign. The safe choices were what had been slowly draining the company's energy. If no one stood up to the fear, nothing would change. He opened his mouth to respond, but then he saw something in the CEO's eyes. It wasn't dismissal, it was waiting to see whether Sundar would let the moment pass. Bill's voice echoed in his mind. "You can't lead without risking mistakes," so he spoke, not loudly, but with conviction. "With respect, delaying this is the real risk. We are already losing time, money, and morale. If we wait a year, we will lose more than that. We will lose good people who care, but feel unheard. This is our chance to act before it's too late." The room was still again. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Then the CEO leaned forward. "Let's put this to a vote." When the hands went up, Sundar's heart pounded. It wasn't unanimous, but the majority was in favor. His plan would move forward. After the meeting, as the others left, Bill appeared in the doorway. He had been sitting quietly in the back the whole time. He didn't congratulate Sundar in front of everyone. Instead, as they walked out together, he simply said, "You didn't win because your plan was perfect. You won because you refused to stay silent." That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment he chose to speak up. The fear had been real, But so was the change that followed. In the days that came after, something shifted in the office. People began sharing bolder ideas in meetings. Younger team members asked more questions. It was as if one act of courage had unlocked permission for others to try. One afternoon, Ramesh stopped by Sundar's office again. "Sir," he said, "before, people were scared to speak up. Now, it feels different. We feel like we have someone in the room who will say what we're thinking." Sundar smiled. It wasn't just about him, it was about building a space where everyone's voice mattered. But he also knew something else. Courage was not a one-time thing. It had to be chosen again and again. The momentum that had been building was real, but it also attracted resistance. Not everyone welcomed the change. Within weeks of his plan being approved, Sundar began to notice subtle pushback. Emails that should have reached him were delayed. Meetings were held without his knowledge. Small, but important updates somehow never made it to his desk. One evening, as the office was emptying out, Bill found him still at his desk, scanning through incomplete reports. "You're being tested," Bill said quietly. "I thought I already passed the test." Sundar replied with a tired smile. "No," Bill shook his head. "Speaking up once is the easy part. Keeping your course when people try to slow you down, that's the hard part." The next day, the resistance became more open. During a major progress meeting, one senior manager openly questioned Sundar's leadership, suggesting that his approach was too aggressive and unrealistic. The words were polite, but the tone carried an edge meant to undermine him. For a brief moment, Sundar felt that old urge to step back, to let the tension pass. But then he remembered the junior engineers who were watching this meeting closely. He realized his reaction would set the tone, not just for this project, but for every project after. So he kept his voice calm. "I understand the concern," he said, "but we're not moving too fast. We're moving at the speed this problem demands. If we slow down now, the gains we've made will fade." There was a pause. A few people looked away, but no one openly challenged him after that. Still, the pushback didn't stop outside the meeting room. That week, 2 critical team members were suddenly reassigned to other projects without warning. It was a move clearly designed to weaken his plan. Sundar spent hours negotiating to get them back, and in the end, he succeeded, but he knew the message had been sent. Some people wanted him to fail. Late Friday evening, he sat in his office staring at the city lights. The fight was wearing him down. He wondered if it was worth it. Just then, an email arrived from Ramesh. It was short. "Sir, just wanted to say, before you spoke up in those meetings, I was planning to leave. Now, I feel like things can change. I hope you don't stop." The words hit him harder than he expected. Here it was, the quiet proof that this was bigger than one plan or one leader. It was about showing people that someone would stand their ground for what mattered. The next Monday, Sundar walked into the office with a steady calm. The resistance was still there, but so was something stronger: his decision to keep going. He began holding open discussions twice a week, where anyone from any level could share ideas or concerns. At first, only a few showed up, then more came. Soon the room was full. Bill stopped by one of these sessions one afternoon. He didn't speak, just listened from the back. When it ended, he came to Sundar and said, "You're doing something rare. You're making it harder for people to hide in the shadows." Sundar knew this wasn't the end of the storm. In fact, the hardest test might still be ahead. But he also knew something else. Storms could tear down walls, but they could also clear the air. Weeks passed, and the resistance that had once been sharp began to soften. The open discussions Sundar started were changing the company in small, almost invisible ways. Engineers who had never spoken in meetings were now presenting ideas. Team leads began sharing credit instead of guarding it. The air in the office felt lighter, even if the work was still hard. But the real test came during the quarterly review. The board members wanted to see if Sundar's plan, the one they had doubted, had delivered results. Numbers were everything here. There would be no hiding behind nice words. As the meeting began, Sundar stood at the front of the room, a simple set of slides behind him. He didn't start with charts, he started with people. He told the story of how the engineering floor had gone from silent to alive with collaboration. He showed pictures of late-night problem-solving sessions, of teams working across departments without being asked. Then he showed the numbers: cost savings, faster project delivery, higher retention rates. Every target had been met, and a few had been exceeded. The room was still, but it was a different kind of stillness this time, one that came when doubt was replaced by quiet respect. When he finished, there was a pause. Then the CEO said, "Well done, Sundar. This is the kind of leadership we need." It was not loud applause or dramatic celebration, but Sundar didn't need that. He glanced toward the back of the room where Bill sat, hands folded, the faintest smile on his face. After the meeting, as people left, Bill walked up beside him. "You stayed," Bill said simply. "Yes," Sundar replied, "and now I'm glad I did." Bill looked out the window at the city skyline. "Remember, leadership is not about one big win. It's about the small things you choose to keep doing when no one is watching. Those are the things that last." That evening, Sundar went home earlier than usual. He sat with his family, laughed over dinner, and felt a lightness he hadn't felt in months. He realized that the quiet lesson Bill had given him at the start had shaped everything that followed. That staying, even when tired, can create ripples that change more than you ever see. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was not the end of the journey. There would be other storms, other walls, other moments when the choice to walk away would seem easier. But now he carried something stronger than exhaustion. He carried the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories are the quiet ones that no one notices right away. Months later, the company was in a far stronger place than when Sundar had almost walked away. Projects were being completed faster, ideas were flowing freely, and the sense of connection between teams was unlike anything he had seen before. But what mattered to him most was that it no longer felt like people were simply working for a paycheck. They were working with pride. One afternoon, as Sundar was preparing for a leadership workshop, he received a call from Bill's assistant. Bill had been unwell for some time, and now he wanted to see Sundar. Without hesitation, Sundar left the office and drove to Bill's home. The house was simple, filled with books and photographs. Bill was sitting in a chair by the window, a blanket over his knees, a cup of tea in his hand. He looked older, but his eyes still carried the same steady warmth. "You came fast," Bill said with a faint smile. "You asked," Sundar replied. "I owed you more than just my time." Bill chuckled softly. "You don't owe me anything. I only reminded you of what you already knew." They spoke for a while, about work, about life, about how quickly time moves. Then Bill leaned back and said, "You've been leading well. I've heard from people in every corner of the company. They say you're building something worth being part of." Sundar felt a lump in his throat. "I only did what you told me to do, stay for the right reasons." Bill shook his head. "No, you stayed, and then you built. That's the difference. Many people can survive storms. Few can turn storms into bridges." The room grew quiet. Bill's gaze shifted to the window. "One day, you'll be in my place. Someone younger faced the same choice you did. When that happens, don't give them a speech. Just give them what I gave you, a question and a quiet truth. That's all they'll need." A week later, Bill passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news spread through the company, and for a day, work stopped. People gathered in small groups, sharing stories of the moments Bill had changed their paths without anyone else knowing. At the memorial, Sundar spoke briefly. He didn't list Bill's achievements or titles. Instead, he told the story of the day he had almost quit and how Bill had stopped him with nothing more than a question and a cup of coffee. He taught me, Sundar said, that leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the courage to see someone, really see them, and remind them of who they can still be. Years later, Sundar would find himself sitting in a small meeting room with a young manager who looked exactly how he had felt back then, tired, ready to walk away. Sundar poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one over, and asked, "Are you leaving because you're done, or because you're tired?" As he watched the manager pause and think, Sundar felt the quiet circle complete itself. Bill's lesson was alive, moving forward through someone else now.